is Anil. I think I've met most of you probably. If not, my full name is Anil Kumar. I live in Plano, Texas, and I've been with MetricStream for over 11 years. Prior to being in product management, I've worked in as a solution architect, delivery manager, and delivery head. So that's short about who I am. And I'm the one also standing between you and your lunch. So, I try to keep it short and then try to close this zone. Pretty recognizable crowd, given that it is small. So feel free to stop me, ask questions, and I'll try to pace it in a way that we get done in time. So what we have as an agenda for today. So we'll touch upon what our Cyber GRC offering is, what entails, what are the features and functionality that go into Cyber GRC. We'll talk about couple of new areas of work. One we've already accomplished, the other one that we're actively working on, namely automated control testing. I know, Clyde, you mentioned about it. We had a session earlier yesterday where we covered this along with AWS. And then we'll talk about dynamic risk assessment. I think some of you may have heard Gavin speak about this. So this is in line with what we are intending to do within our product. And then finally, if time permits, we'll cover the new UI UX features that we are introducing in the product. So that's what I have in store. You don't need to wait for the last to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions if in case you have any when I'm running through the slides. So I want to begin with this quote from one of our most important customers. I think it's the important thing being called out here is, are we measuring risk effectively? I would like to start with this. I'll leave it a minute for you to read through this. Okay, so how do we within MetricStream help customers measure risk effectively? So our Cyber GRC product covers 4 functions or 4 pillars, namely IT risk, IT compliance, IT policy, and then vendor risk management. So these are the 4 areas overall that we cover in our Cyber GRC product line. So for example, in IT risk, we allow you to manage asset management, allow data categorization to work with with your product owners. We allow you to identify risk, analyze risk, perform risk assessment, risk treatment. There is also a component of threat and vulnerability management, and also risk quantification. So that's what makes up IT risk. On the IT compliance side, we have in the last couple of years, we have also started to offer standard content. We've seen many customers develop their own content, but on the IT compliance side, we've also started to provide main content within the cyber world, be it PCI, HIPAA, SOC 2, all mapped to rationalized control of NIST SP 853. So that's the content that we offer. So any customers who would like to use this can rely on that content. And then of course a framework to perform control test, a framework to perform self-assessment, and then also evidence management. So that's what's made up of IT compliance. When you move to IT policy, we allow a framework to author, review, and then publish policies, policy attestation, exception management to policy. So that's what makes up IT policy management. And finally, the vendor risk management, where we provide framework to enable to onboard customers, onboard vendors, onboard due diligence process, allow you to get external risk intelligence, as well as perform continuous monitoring of vendors. So that's in short everything that makes up our Cyber GRC product line. You may all heard about the new launch on Aspire. So I want to just make a mention on that until now what we used to offer in our product was all about how do you perform control test, how do you perform risk assessment, how do you evaluate your third-party vendors. With introduction of Aspire, we will also be able to make recommendation of what and when. What are the risks that you need to evaluate, what are the controls you need to test, and how often you need to test. So that's what's coming with the introduction of Aspire as a product. Any questions here before I move into the next topic? Good? Okay. I think you may have seen also this slide. So everything that we are doing, in the new features that we are working on, falls under these 3, for lack of a better term, themes. So it is cognitive, where we're looking at how we can utilize AI to improve what you do, make good recommendations. Continuous improve automation, hyper automate the process, allow you to do prepackage the content as I mentioned, and then cloud, using our low code no code platform, being able to deploy faster and being able to upgrade more seamlessly going forward. So these are the three themes in which everything that we are doing in MetricStream across all our product lines. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is automated control testing. So basically, as you may have all come across, the control environment is getting more and more complex. The reasons are many. You're adopting more and more applications, new processes. You're using shared infrastructure. Settle down. You have shared infrastructure. You are working on cloud environment, deploying cloud in multiple ways. It could be a hybrid cloud, it could be a private cloud, and finally also many compliance requirements which are imposed on you either because of an industry standard or for regulatory requirement. So it is important for one to look at all the risks associated with your control environment and make a right decision of what are the controls that you want to develop, the appropriate controls to meet your compliance requirements. A little controversial slide. I think everyone's aware of what are the families of controls. So, if you look at families of controls as verticals, what I've put up here is, looking at controls in a horizontal. So basically, we can categorize the controls as controls that are relevant for policies and procedures, which are your internal controls, which it ensures that your organizational processes are done in a consistent manner. That's what policies and procedures are. Then your application controls, which helps you secure your information and then ensure that your CIA objectives are met. And then the larger chunk, which is your infrastructure control, your cloud environment, your on-prem environment, your hardware assets of networking, so all that fall under the infrastructure control. And it is in this space is where there is most potential for automation. Again, referring back to the session that we had yesterday with AWS, AWS provides automated controls testing for their infrastructure. So, we have developed functionality and feature where we import the automated control tests that have been performed by AWS and then map those controls, which we call them rules or checks, and integrate that with the GRC libraries and then show you a consolidated results of both the control tests as well as the evidence. So this is how, as I explained to you, if you take a look at some certain examples, some of the controls cuts across both infrastructure and say application. If I think of one, something like an audit log, right? You need to maintain an audit log evidence for both your infrastructure side as well as for the applications that you use. So it becomes important that you get a view of the consolidated results for your GRC controls spanning across both infrastructure and application. So as I mentioned, what we have done within MetricStream is we allow you to import the control testing from these systems like AWS. Similarly, Azure provides their own system of automated compliance. So we allow you to import those rules and checks. Using AML, we map them to the GRC control library that you have, and then we are able to publish a report which shows you across, to look at the control test results to make the right determination of the effectiveness of the control. Again, these are estimates. These are all the various ROI that you can expect. If you go on the compliance journey, again, depends on the scale of the company, depends on your business, how much cloud adoption there is. So based on that, you could look to reduce your compliance errors by implementing automation, your improvement in efficiency, reduction in compliance cost, and then of course improved customer satisfaction. I think, and I put this slide, and later it was aha yesterday. Jonathan Ruff also mentioned the same. He said compliance is not equal to security. It is necessary but not sufficient to mitigate your cyber risks. So this is a good segue for us to move from what we are doing in compliance to what we are doing in risk. So before we move into risk, any specific questions that you want me to answer before we go ahead, right?
Like automated testing and automated evidence collection, to you guys, is that two different functionalities, or are you encompassing that?
It's together, yeah.
Okay.
So basically on the cloud side, the evidence are, most of the cases from what I have seen, are like JSON output. It's an immutable evidence. You go run certain query, run a certain check, and then capture that evidence. And at least working with AWS, we've understood that the auditors are accepting that as an evidence. So that is what will be collected as evidence. It's not like a separate attachment or anything. It will be the output of a JSON query. That is what will get used as evidence.
Okay. And that's like an integration into, for example, like Audit Manager with AWS.
Yeah. So we already have an integration with Security Hub, which is another service. I think you have a session later today where we talk about what's AWS is talking about what Security Hub is. So we already have a integration with that, which does the same, which does the testing every day. The same controls are being tested every day, evidences are captured, and then based on the mapping, the results are shown on the GRC controls. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll move ahead here to our risk topic. So this is one of the exciting features that we are working on. Again, I think some of you who walked in here, I believe, would have attended Gavin's session. So this is in line with what Gavin may have suggested in terms of performing risk assessments constantly. So what is dynamic risk assessment? Dynamic risk assessment is a numerical representation of risk to an asset. It is something that is a continuous process. It keeps happening behind the scenes as and when the source data feeds come in, and then it constantly considers the changing threat landscape and then the asset environment. So this is what, in short, is dynamic risk assessment. So how do you go about accomplishing this? So these are all, I've kind of laid out here in 5 simple steps. What are those 5 steps that we need to achieve in order to be able to get to a dynamic risk assessment stage? Sorry, the text may be a little short, but so the first step is to identify the assets and the sources for your risk factors. So the identification of asset could be integration with the CMDB, or these days all the vulnerability scanners provide asset management capability, which you can utilize in order to bring that data into the platform. And then the source for risk factors. What are those risk factors that you want to use in order to determine the risk to the asset, right? It could be, again, the number of vulnerabilities that are associated with the asset, the information from your threat intelligence into what are those that affect these assets. It could be your, issue management. How many issues are open with a certain severity on your towards your asset, right? And then, similarly, also a patch management system, right? Whether the asset in question, has it been patched or not patched? So these are all your sources of risk information. The next is to determine what are the KRIs or the metrics that you want to use in order to determine your overall risk score. So again, as I explained, it could be number of exploited vulnerabilities, patching status, it could be your issue, number of open issues towards your asset. So these all make up your KRIs. The next, which is the most important and probably the most challenging one, is to be able to connect via APIs and gather this information on real time. So, being able to integrate with your patching management system, being able to integrate with your vulnerability management system and receive that feed, which also brings in the information of the asset towards which you are collecting the risk, as well as the data points of how many severe vulnerabilities are there, how many number of issues are open, how many threats are acting towards the type of asset that you're dealing with. So that is the step where you develop API and constantly get this feed in order to get real-time updates on the risk. The third one is we'll talk about more details of what can an example algorithm look like, right? So the algorithm framework is nothing but you're assigning a relative weightage to the risk factors that or the KRIs that you're using, right? How much weightage do you want to assign to a vulnerability? How much weightage you want to assign to a issue, the number of issues. So that is what is done under the algorithm framework step, and you determine what's the equation to derive to arrive at the asset risk score. Is it this weightage plus this is the data source feed plus or minus, and then you determine what is the way you want to get to the asset risk score. So that is the fourth step. And final step is, once these things happen behind the scenes, being able to look up in a real-time dashboard which constantly updates the asset risk score, so that you're always able to visualize the most important assets that you need to go after. Because ultimately, you don't have enough capacity or resources to go after every asset and remediate them. So it is important, when we're working within a boundary, to know what are those most important assets that you want to watch for and then go remediate them. So that's what this dynamic dashboard helps. So I'll go to the next slide and talk about the equation example. Again, we have random example. You have an asset that you're dealing with, which is payroll database. You do your business criticality as high. If you are able to capture the asset value depending on the data that it holds, you determine that asset value. And here are the 4 KRIs that I've considered. Number of exploited vulnerabilities, number of open issues, patching status, a number of threats. And then you assign relative weightage to them. Once you do that, then based on the APIs that you have developed, you would get a feed for that specific asset. How many of them you have found, right? There are 10 exploited vulnerabilities for that asset. There are the patching status is unpatched, so you have a number of 1, and your number of threats. There are 5 threats from your threat intel report that is attributable to that asset. So this is how you would, as an example, you get the data feed from the source, which is a real-time data set, and then you determine the asset risk score, which is again this is something which is configurable. You can go ahead and configure depending on what makes sense for you, and then determine what's your asset risk score. So this is the score for this asset. So likewise, based on the automated feed that is there, it constantly churns the output for every single asset that you have on record or your inventory, and then we'll publish this dashboard. So we'll go to the dashboard. Yeah. So again, example of a dashboard. This is something which is still in the works. This we're working on to bring within the next coming year. So this is like a dynamic dashboard which will list various attributes of the asset with its asset risk score, and it constantly up to dates. So for example, say you have today, when you first looked at this, it may have a score of say 610. It is based on the number of vulnerabilities your vulnerability scanner identified, or based on the number of open issues at that point of time. Now, during the course of the day, somebody worked on those issues, resolved them, or there was a new scan run, and because of some of the patches that were deployed, the number of vulnerabilities that you find is fewer. So then this constant, because it is happening real time behind the scenes, it updates the record, and then it brings lower, and then the other one will come up, so that you are constantly looking at the ones that you need to attend to as a team, and focus your team's efforts to doing the most important, manage the most important asset. So this is about how the dashboard would look like, and this is the last slide on the dynamic risk assessment. So before we go into UI UX and what we are doing towards this, which is scheduled for March release, any specific questions on the dynamic risk assessment side?
Can you go back to the slide
Sure.
that showed how the scores calculated?
So you want to go back? Okay.
Okay.
Again, this is just an example. Okay, it need not have to be necessarily this, but this is just an example. Go ahead.
Right. So is the thinking that this could be configurable based on
Yes.
the organization?
Yes.
Or is it fixed? Okay.
No, it is configurable. Again, it depends on each organization, what kind of data source you have, right? Some company may have patching management system, some may not have. Some of them may have a vulnerability scanner, may not. Today, most of them will have, but again, and there may be some things that you may want to additionally consider as well, which is not listed here, right? Which you feel have to be taken into account in order to determine the asset risk score. So it need not be limited to 4. It could be any which you have access to, which you can tap into to make that determination. So that's what you need to go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anil, I have one question.
Go ahead.
So the 10 that is showing your metrics from source. I mean, what's the significance of this one number?
So that is the number of vulnerabilities that your scanner has thrown, right? Okay. So your vulnerability scanner routinely does the scan, and then say towards this your IP-based asset, you have 20 vulnerabilities. Among them, 5 of them are with a certain severity score or a CVSS score. So you should be able to determine which one you want to account for. If you say, I want to only look at the ones which are of major, and then that count 10 represents the major.
But my question is like the vulnerabilities, even though, the asset is say, it's not critical, it's not business impacting.
Sure.
And though it has a high severity,
Absolutely.
I don't want the team to take that up.
Absolutely, makes sense.
Because I don't want to waste the time.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
How could that?
So that is there. If you see here in this dashboard,
Right.
business criticality is something as an assessment that you do on an asset, right? So when you import the asset into our platform, one of the, again, if it is available in CMDB, from what I have not seen CMDB be having the business criticality assessment available. So when you import, one of the first things that you would do is to do a business criticality assessment and do a data categorization of the asset that you've imported. So once you have performed that, you have a business criticality value for each of them. So you will be able to just filter this out based on only the business critical, which are of critical in nature. Does that answer?
Yes.
No. No other questions? Okay. I will move ahead to UI UX. I think we have 5 minutes left for our lunch. So 2 slides here. We'll quickly touch upon what we are doing on the dashboard and reporting side, and then we'll also quickly touch upon what we are doing on the form side. So this is a complete revamp of our UI UX, which is scheduled for the March 2024 release. So what we are doing here in reports and dashboard is improved. Of course, you can see that the color palettes are different. It looks more slicker, better use of white space. We've got some feedback, a lot of feedback on better use of space within our application. So we've taken all of those into account and have come up with a design which lays out the information, most critical information, say for each application. The most here in case of say IT risk or IT compliance, what is your asset risk score? What is your number of issues towards your asset? What is from IT compliance point of view? What are the where do you stand in the overall compliance? So those most critical information is laid out in the what we call as an info center, but like a web page. And then we also have introduced several new scorecards, which gives you quick insight of the information. And it also has drill down capabilities where you will be able to go into any of these charts or reports and drill down further for deeper insights. And finally, each of this page also has page level filtering capability where you can filter the results based on a certain time period or based on a certain line of business that is of your interest. So this is how the new reporting and dashboarding will look like when we move into the new UX capability. Again, some of those features that don't exist today, which you will be able to do on runtime, which today you may have to work with certain development team or additional configuration to achieve. So those capabilities will come in upfront to the end user.
Oh, sorry, can I just take a picture of this?
Sure, I can send it to you
While you're on
afterwards.
this,
Okay, yeah.
how is Aspire taken into account in your dashboarding that you use? So this is status,
Mhm. Sure.
recommendations, step forward.
Yes.
Is it viewed as just a separate product, a separate
No, it is
environment
not.
to go look at, or does it overlay it against, okay, here's my results and here's what?
Yeah,
Will
it
it be
is.
part of a drill down to get to?
Yeah, it is something that is sitting on top. If you have to visualize, it is going to be sitting on top, and the Aspire will have its own reporting and dashboard, which will tap into the data set that is there on each of the application, look at it collectively, and then provide you the result or recommendations.
Because there's a human referee in the middle that says, here's my
Correct.
status, here's what's being recommended, do I agree?
Yes, that happens in Aspire.
Okay.
Yeah. So you will be able, in Aspire, you will be able to set, hey, what's your strategy? I think as what Raghu said, based on the recommendation we provide. First, you will be able to set how do you want to get the recommendation, within what guardrails you want to get the recommendation. Secondly, after you get the recommendation, what strategy you want to be aggressive with rationalization, or you want to be moderate. So all those optionalities are handled within Aspire.
Thank you.
Okay. So last slide, again, as I spoke about, all the changes are also coming in on the report side. So that it's an entire update to the application and platform. So with the introduction of changes in the to the forms, just the fields, the way they are laid out are significantly improving. The way the ratings are displayed, the way you will be able to select from a pick list, the way you will be able to leave comments, all of that is going to change in how it will be within this release to what you've probably been experienced today on M7. And also there is context. I think one of the things that we've heard from customers is that in many cases the context is missing. I'm taking example of control test. You've heard this word too many times during the summit here. When you are doing a control test, you are going through a certain test procedure. It is important for you to keep a tab on, hey, what is a control? What is a control description or narrative? What are the risks that are associated with this control while you work through your testing procedure? So those things will be possible with the way we have designed the forms, which provides you the information of context. And again, we also are going to be able to render the form not just as sections. So today, if you're using M7, you see all the data that is coming up as sections on your left page. So with the move to this, you'll also be able to render the information as tabs, which inherently by design brings you performance improvements. So again, this keep a watch on this. We'll probably share more information towards this with all our customers. Again, we've held sessions with our customers, giving them a walkthrough of how we are designing, getting feedback early in the cycle so that we can accommodate those feedbacks and then deliver something which will be really truly game changing for our customers. So we are open to hearing for feedback. We can do sessions with you to just kind of describe what we have done, and please let us know what more you think we could do. With that, I think we are good to close unless there are any other questions that you have. Good.